might not be an off-season in professional wrestling, but sometimes wrestlers do need to take time off. They could need to rehab an injury, serve a suspension, or simply need to go away because they've been overexposed and have to leave so they can come back fresh. There are many ways to write a performer off television, simple, time-tested ways, but why go for those when you can get creative with stabbings, explosions, and good old-fashioned kidnappings? I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 bizarre ways wrestlers have been written off TV. Join us! Number 10. Stabbed in a nightclub. Toward the end of 2004, it was becoming plainly obvious that John Cena was the next major wrestling star on the cusp of breaking out. WWE sensed it, which is why they made Cena United States Champion and selected him to head up their first WWE Studios vehicle, the Marine. Since the Marine was being filmed in Australia, Cena needed to not only drop his title, but be excused from storylines for about a month or so. He did the honors to a debut in Carlito, and then afterwards it was announced that the Doctor of Thugonomics had been stabbed while out in a Boston area nightclub. Can you imagine trying to explain to the young impressionable members of the C Nation what a stabbing is, or a nightclub, or Boston? A week later, SmackDown general manager Teddy Long told the rest of the assembled roster that Cena had been stabbed in the kidney and that it was unknown how long he would be out for. Until the rap party down under is my guess. Carlito's bodyguard Jesus was accused of doing the dirty deed, and Cena duly came back for revenge with nary a scar on his body. Number 9. Filleted by Janice. When it comes to wacky ways to write wrestlers off TV, perhaps no company quite compares to TNA/Impact. Right at the top of the list, well, in at number 9 here, but you get my point, is the logic-defying way that Rob Van Dam was excused from duty in the summer of 2010. The whole flippin' show was feuding with the deranged Abyss, who, at that time, had taken to carrying around a massive plank covered in nails, which he affectionately named Janice. It was a ludicrous weapon that really should have never been near television, don't get me wrong, I'm so glad it was, but TNA Creative put the thing to use by having the monster actually use it on RVD on the August 12th, 2010 edition of Impact. Abyss dragged Van Dam backstage during the show closing brawl, and when the camera cut to them shortly after, the champ was lying, singlet torn, in a pool of his own blood while Abyss stood over him cradling his toy. Now, I'm no mathematician, but putting 2 and 2 together here equals attempted murder. This grotesque angle was deemed necessary since RVD's contract called for a bunch more money if TNA exceeded his set number of yearly dates, and they were close to reaching that figure. He was stripped of the TNA title while he took a 6-week vacation, with TNA claiming he had suffered spinal trauma and possible brain damage during the attack. And honestly, I feel like I also suffered possible brain damage from watching this silly angle unfold. Number 8. Destination OVW. The Spirit Squad stable was WWE's way of calling up 5 prospects from Feeder Farm OVW at the same time. The quintet of green-clad greenhorns were thrust into the spotlight as the annoying male cheerleaders who initially did dance routines and then somehow found themselves in major storylines and in possession of Raw's World Tag Team titles. The art of falling upwards, eh? In mixing with the McMahons, D-Generation X, and other top stars, the group's members must have felt like they were made men. Hell, they even got a pay-per-view main event out of their association with Vince, Shane, Hunter, and Shawn, even if they were trounced and then humiliated in the 5-on-2 handicap match at Vengeance. Unfortunately for them, that wasn't the end of their humbling at the hands of the Game and the Heartbreak Kid. After losing a 5-on-3 handicap match to DX and Ric Flair on the November 27th, 2006 episode of Raw, Mikey, Johnny, Kenny, Nikki, and Mitch were bundled into a crate labeled Destination OVW Louisville, Kentucky, letting fans know that they were literally being shipped back to developmental. A funny in-joke to those in the know, I'm willing to bet that the reference went over the collective heads of the casual fan. Number 7. Thrown in front of a train. More madness from TNA now as we look at the way that Mickie James was written off television on the June 3rd, 2015 episode of Impact. The former Knockouts champion had no more dates left on her contract, so TNA devised a way to get her off their screens while they further negotiated. And what better way to do that than by having James Storm try to kill her at a train station? The Cowboy took this step after James turned down an invitation to Storm's Revolution stable, walking the seemingly clueless Mickie to her demise by taking her to the station and bumping her off the platform. Because of the camera angles and the quality of the CCTV-style footage, it was hard to tell whether she fell 6 feet, 6 inches, or what, but the diabolical Storm's monologue indicated that she was lying a long way down. So, did the next episode of Impact begin with Mickie's funeral or the arrest of James Storm? Nope, life simply continued as normal until she returned less than a month later to confront Storm and challenge him to an intergender tag match. Personally, I would be more concerned with pressing charges, but each to their own. Number 6, kidnapped by ninjas. Samoa Joe wasn't injured or in the middle of contract talks or, well, anything when TNA decided to write him off television in February of 2010. The new management, Hogan, Bischoff and the lads, simply wanted him to take a vacation so that he could come back repackaged as a vicious, psychopathic heel. The great idea they had to take him away from the Impact Zone was by having him lose a match to Orlando Jordan, great start, and then have him be attacked and kidnapped by a mysterious group of ninjas. Even better ending. In the grand scheme of things, being attacked and bundled into a white van by ninjas isn't the weirdest thing TNA have ever done or would ever do, but bear in mind, this was one of their top stars and a former world heavyweight champion. Also, the so-called ninjas were wearing shorts. The brainchild of Bischoff or Vince Russo or whoever you want to blame, personally I just blame both because it's easier and they're both guilty as sin as far as I'm concerned, the kidnapping wasn't explained or even really referenced again when the Samoan submission machine simply returned due to the roster being thin on the babyface front. Cool swerve, bro. Number 5, buried alive in cement. At the 2003 Survivor Series, The Undertaker was written out of storylines by being buried alive by Kane so that he could heal up from injuries and grow his hair out in anticipation of returning months later with his revived Deadman persona. Fans were pleasantly surprised to see Paul Bearer by the Phenom's side when he re-emerged at WrestleMania 20, since it was the first time in about 4 years that Taker's kayfabe father had been spotted in a WWE ring. During his absence, William Moody had battled health issues related to obesity and depression. As part of his signing bonus, WWE agreed to pay for gastric bypass surgery, enabling him to become an on-screen character once more. Regrettably, Moody developed gallstones and needed gallbladder surgery not too long after his return, with WWE opting to write Paul Bearer out of storylines. After being kidnapped by the Dudley Boys at the behest of Blue Brand GM Paul Heyman, Bearer's fate was sealed at the Great American Bash when he was submerged in cement at the end of the Concrete Crypt main event. It was later clarified that Bearer was simply gravely ill rather than actually deceased. No need to panic then, eh? Number 4, sleeping with the fishes. One situation that forces WWE's hand and typically requires someone being written out of storylines is when a superstar falls afoul of the company's wellness policy. When a wrestler, particularly a top-level talent, is forced to sit out for 30 or 60 days, WWE need to come up with some kayfabe reason for them being MIA. Typically, they will shoot an injury angle, although sometimes they will come up with something a bit juicier, like when Ken Kennedy was suspended in the storyline for impersonating a McMahon. NXT's Troy 2 Dimes Donovan was one of the unlucky few who have been outright fired after getting popped with a wellness policy violation. Because he was part of the storyline at the time as a member of Tony D'Angelo's family, WWE felt the need to explain his disappearance. After an off-screen betrayal, Tony and his associate Stax were shown standing on a bridge when a splash was heard. Then Donovan's watch was thrown into the water and it was said that the released star was probably sleeping with the fishes. Now, I've heard some rumors about what those perverts get up to in Orlando, but that really takes some, oh wait a minute, it just means he got whacked off. Sorry, I mean whacked. Or did I? Number 3, fired and then kicked in the balls by Linda McMahon. Furious after the entire McMahon family were hit with stone-cold stunners at 2005's Big Raw Homecoming, Patriarch Vince promised the following week that someone would be fired in the fallout. While Vince claimed that he and Shane could take care of themselves, he blamed the announce team of Jonathan Coachman, Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross for not taking action and preventing his wife and daughter from being assaulted. Coach and King were let off the hook after a apologizing, but good old JR was not so lucky. He was forced to say sorry to Stephanie and Linda personally, but evidently it wasn't good enough because he was fired by Linda, who turned heel. Yes, Linda McMahon turned heel and kicked the commentator in the government mules for good measure. It was an odd segment, no doubt, positioned in the main event slot no less, and a bizarre way to write Ross off of television. The man in the black hats needed to take time off for colon surgery, and WWE had genuine designs on replacing him in the booth full time. In their minds, this was actually the Hall of Famers send-off. Well, until next week and Dr. Heine, that is. Number 2, suspended for insulting the big boss man's mother. We have seen some gosh darned low-down tactics employed by WWE heels over the years, from mocking genuine tragedies to good old-fashioned attempted murders and everything in between. But insulting a man's mother? Well, I'm sorry, that's just taking things too far. Former on-screen WWE president Jack Tunney evidently agrees, because he indefinitely suspended Rick Rude and further punished his manager Bobby Heenan after they incessantly took shots at the big boss man's big mama. I mean, his name is Rick Rude, it's not Rick Nice or even Rick Respectful for that matter. Coming abruptly in the middle of their feud, ravishing Rick's suspension was done because the former Intercontinental Champion had in fact up and quit the promotion. Tired with his position and pay, Rude handed in his notice. WWE fully intended to hold him to the terms of his contract, however, thus the indefinite suspension, which could have easily been lifted if/when he returned. Rude didn't return though, and so Tunney's statement basically wrote him off until he returned as a member of DX almost 7 years later. Number 1, Limo explosion. Though he was an ever-present as a television character for the best part of 25 years, Vince McMahon would, periodically, decide to write himself off his own shows, either because he thought that he was too old to be on the box, or because he wanted the attention and emphasis to be placed on others. As with anything Vince-related, the ways in which he was written off were typically far from normal. He's had the $1 Million Mania stage collapse on him, he's been beaten up inside Hell in a Cell before having his face shoved in Big Show's backside, and so on and so forth. That said, none of these quite measure up to when he was literally blown up after closing the door of his limo on the Mr. McMahon Appreciation Night episode of Raw in June 2007. The genetic jackhammer's mental faculties had recently been questioned, in kayfabe, wink wink, and he had been acting oddly the whole show based on a bad feeling before he went kaboom. This was supposedly going to lead to a long and twist-laden investigation to find out the culprit before real-life tragedy forced Vince to drop the act and claim that he had faked his own demise.